the chosen one. The storm raged inside you, louder than the thunder that cracked above the mountains. You could not see its source, yet you felt it, a pulse that was not of this world, a whisper pressing against the edges of your soul. That night, when the silence broke into wind and rain, you finally heard it, a voice not outside, but within, soft, like a secret, demanding, like truth. You had always wondered if destiny was something that found you or something you created, but on that night, when the storm called your name, the question became irrelevant. The moment you felt that pulse of divine electricity move through your veins, your life divided into two halves before the call, and after it. You did not ask for this, you did not seek it, but the divine seeks those who cannot remain asleep. At first, you resisted. You told yourself it was a dream, a figment of imagination, the echo of exhaustion. Yet the call grew louder. It was not a command, not even an invitation, it was a recognition. As if the universe had finally remembered who you truly were. Days passed in confusion. You tried to live as before, but something within had shifted. The colors of the world seemed sharper. The silence between moments carried a hidden rhythm. You began to feel watched, not by eyes of judgment, but by something vast, something ancient, something patient. Every chosen one begins here, in disbelief. The first stage of divine awakening is not enlightenment. It is chaos. It is the disorientation of realizing that your purpose was never yours to choose. You walked through the familiar streets, but everything now felt foreign. People spoke to you, yet their words floated past like forgotten clouds. You smiled, nodded, but inside, you were unraveling. The storm had not passed. It had taken residence within you, and in the quiet hours of dawn, when even the shadows seemed to rest, a question haunted you. Why me? That question is sacred. It is the birth of every chosen one's journey. You are not chosen because you are perfect. You are chosen because you are willing to be broken, for it is through the cracks that light enters. The voice returned 3 nights later. This time, it spoke with clarity. You were never meant to live small, it said, and your heart trembled. You felt torn between awe and terror. The words burned through your doubts, yet you could not embrace them fully. What did it mean to be chosen? To be set apart in a world that craves belonging? You feared the weight of that word. It felt like both an honor and a curse. You tried to pray, but the words failed. You tried to sleep, but the dreams were louder than waking life. Every image shimmered with symbols you couldn't decode: golden doors, rivers of light, a hand reaching out from the dark. You began to suspect that perhaps the calling was not about comfort, but transformation. And transformation always demands a death before rebirth. At sunrise, you stood before the mirror and saw a stranger staring back. There was something new in your eyes, a mixture of fear and fire. You didn't recognize it, yet it recognized you. That morning, you realized the truth. The call was not coming from the heavens, it was rising from within. The divine does not shout from the sky, it awakens from your depths. You wanted proof, signs, something tangible to make sense of this invisible pull. And the universe, in its strange precision, began to respond. A song played on the radio that mirrored your thoughts. A stranger spoke the same words that had haunted your dreams. Numbers repeated on clocks. Whispers of synchronicity surrounded your every move. Coincidence? Or confirmation? You could not tell anymore. But your heart began to lean into the unknown. Still, fear shadowed every step. What if this path led nowhere? What if you were only chasing illusions? You wanted to believe, but the world had taught you to doubt anything that could not be seen, measured, or explained. And so began your inner war, the battle between reason and revelation. At times, you wanted to run back to the familiar, to the safety of your old life, your old patterns, your old certainty. But once the heart is touched by the infinite, no cage can contain it again. You stood on the edge of surrender, one choice away from transformation. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. That night, you dreamt again. You stood before a vast sea under a sky of burning light. The waves whispered your name, and in their rhythm, you heard a prophecy. To be chosen is not to be superior, it is to be seen. When you woke, tears traced down your face, not of sorrow, but of recognition. You finally understood the divine does not choose those who are ready. It chooses those who are willing to begin before they are prepared. You rose from your bed, trembling yet awake. You stepped into the dawn not as who you were, but as who you were becoming. The storm had not ended, it had only just begun, and somewhere, in the unseen realm, the whisper returned. Soft, certain, eternal, the call has been heard. Your journey as the Chosen One had begun. The Chosen One, the dawn after revelation, is never gentle. You awoke not to peace, but to pressure. The air itself felt heavier, as if every breath demanded awareness, every heartbeat whispered responsibility. You looked around your world, and everything appeared the same, yet nothing truly was. You had crossed an invisible threshold, and though no one else could see it, your soul carried the mark of that crossing. It was not visible to the eye, but it burned through every moment of silence. The knowing that you had been called, the fear that you could not return. The chosen ones are not blessed first, they are burdened, for awakening is not an escape from suffering. It is a magnifying glass held against the soul, showing every fracture, every forgotten wound, every secret shadow still clinging to your heart. You began to feel the pull of two worlds, the ordinary and the divine, each demanding your loyalty. And in that tension, your faith began to tremble. You wanted to believe that this calling would bring light, but instead, it brought storms. People who once understood you now found you distant, distracted, unreachable. Their words felt shallow, their laughter hollow. You tried to explain, but how could you speak of things you barely understood yourself? So you stayed silent, and in that silence, the loneliness began. Nights turned into restless vigils. You lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the noise of your thoughts crashing like waves. "Why me?" you whispered again. "Why now?" No answer came, only the echo of your own heartbeat. Faith, you realized, was not a feeling. It was a decision made in darkness. You remembered the voice from the storm. It had promised transformation, not comfort. So perhaps this confusion, this tearing apart of who you thought you were, was the first step. The chosen ones must be stripped of illusions before they can carry light. You began to see your life unravel. The plans you had built so carefully started to fall apart. Opportunities slipped away. Relationships ended without explanation. Doors you had prayed to open were suddenly closed. You fought against it, tried to fix what was breaking, but every attempt failed. And in that failure, something ancient whispered, "Let it collapse." What falls was never meant to hold you. It was cruel comfort, but it was true. The divine was not punishing you, it was clearing the way. You started noticing a pattern. Every loss, every disappointment seemed to carve space for something unseen. It was as if the universe was dismantling your old self, piece by piece, so that something new could emerge. Yet the in-between was agony. You were neither who you had been, nor who you were becoming. You lived in the wilderness, between identities, and that wilderness had no map. You prayed for guidance. None came. You demanded signs. The heavens stayed silent. It was then you understood the cruel paradox of divine awakening. The silence of God is not absence, it is preparation. You were being taught to listen beyond words, to feel without proof, to trust without evidence. Every chosen one walks through this valley, the valley of unknowing, where faith is tested not by miracles but by emptiness. One night, as the weight of uncertainty pressed upon you, you fell to your knees. The tears came not from sadness, but from surrender. You whispered, "If this is truly you, then I am done fighting." And in that instant, the air shifted. The silence you feared turned into a presence, invisible but undeniable. Not a voice, not a vision, but a pulse, deep in your chest. The pulse of something eternal, moving through your fragile humanity. You realized that surrender was not defeat. It was alignment. The divine does not need your strength. It needs your openness. From that moment, small miracles began to appear, subtle but real. The right message at the right time. A stranger's kindness when you were about to give up. The sense that somehow you were being guided even when you could not see the path. But with guidance came the next trial. You began to dream again, visions of light and shadow intertwined. You saw doors opening, then closing. You heard whispers in languages you could not name. Each morning you woke shaken, uncertain if these were divine messages or your mind's rebellion. Doubt became your closest companion. You asked yourself if you were losing your sanity. You wondered if faith and madness were twins born from the same womb. And yet, deep inside, a quiet voice persisted. It did not argue or explain it, simply existed, constant, patient, waiting for your trust. The chosen ones do not escape doubt. They learn to walk through it. Your awakening was not about seeing visions, it was about seeing truth. The truth that everything you seek in heaven is already hidden within you. The next morning, you felt lighter, not because your burdens were gone, but because you stopped resisting them. You walked outside and noticed how the world glowed differently. The trees no longer stood, they breathed. The light no longer shone, it whispered. Every sound carried meaning. Every silence spoke of grace. You were beginning to perceive through the eye of the soul, the same eye through which the divine sees you. And yet, as the peace began to bloom, another shadow rose: fear of responsibility. You began to understand that awakening is not the end of pain, it is the beginning of purpose. And purpose is heavy, because once you know, you cannot unknow. Once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you awaken, you cannot return to sleep. You have been chosen, not to escape the world, but to transform within it. You are not called to be perfect. You are called to be real, to walk through the fire and emerge transparent enough for light to pass through you. The chapter of peace is always followed by the chapter of testing. You could feel it coming: the next wave, the next trial. The divine never calls without consequence, but for now, you stood still beneath the morning light. You felt both fragile and infinite. You were learning the first true secret of awakening. To walk the sacred path, you must first survive the breaking. And though your hands trembled, your spirit whispered, "I am still here." Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. The chosen one, the call had changed you, but now the fire would remake you. This was no longer the whisper of a storm. This was the furnace of becoming. You had stepped into the divine current, and the current would not let you rest. You began to notice it first in small things: your emotions sharper, your sensitivity stronger, your peace fragile like glass. The things you once tolerated now disturbed you. The lies you once told yourself no longer worked. You could not hide in comfort anymore. The light had entered, and it demanded honesty. To be chosen is to burn. You did not ask for this purification, yet it came all the same. You started feeling as though the universe was stripping you layer by layer, leaving only truth behind. People fell away, habits dissolved, desires changed without warning. Everything you had built to define yourself: success, control, belonging, began to crumble. At first, you thought it was loss. Later, you realized it was liberation. The chosen ones are not given strength, they are given pressure. They are not offered peace, they are offered process. And that process began to test you. Some days, you woke with a heavy heart and the weight of invisible wars. Other days, you felt strangely powerful, filled with a peace that had no reason to exist. It was as if two forces battled inside you: fear and faith, ego and essence. There were moments you wanted to escape, to numb the pain, to return to ignorance, to silence the voice that had called you. But each time you tried, something within resisted. The same power that broke you would not let you run. It whispered, "Stay. The breaking is holy." And so, you stayed. The purification did not happen in silence, it came through storms. You were misunderstood, judged, abandoned by those who could not see what you were becoming. They called you strange, distant, unstable, and part of you wondered if they were right. But the deeper part of you, the one that had heard the divine whisper, knew this was necessary. For the chosen ones must learn to stand alone before they can lead others. You began to face your shadows. Every wound you had buried rose to the surface. The pain of rejection, the guilt of failure, the fear of not being enough. It all came roaring back, like ghosts demanding recognition. You tried to pray them away, but prayer did not erase them. Instead, it exposed them to light. The divine does not remove your darkness. It teaches you to transform it. And so you learned slowly, painfully, to sit with what hurt, to listen to your own ache, to look your demons in the eye without running. This was not punishment, it was purification. One evening, you stood at the edge of a river. The sky bled into crimson, as if creation itself were burning. You felt the wind move through you, not around you. You closed your eyes, and in that stillness, you heard it again, the whisper that had begun this journey. "You are not being punished," it said. "You are being prepared." Those words changed everything. You fell to your knees, the tears not of sorrow, but of release. For the first time, you understood that every breaking was sacred, every loss an initiation, every silence a form of speech. You were being sculpted by invisible hands. The fire was not your enemy, it was your teacher. Days turned into a blur of surrender. You stopped fighting what ended and started honoring what began. You noticed that each time something fell away, something new emerged, a deeper peace, a sharper intuition, a quieter strength. You began to feel guided not by reason, but by rhythm. The universe spoke to you now, in symbols, numbers repeating, strangers echoing your thoughts, dreams carrying messages that felt too precise to be random. You started to realize that you were not alone in this process. The divine was choreographing everything, even your pain. At times, the weight of transformation felt unbearable. You longed for rest, but rest was not given. Instead, you were asked to trust, to let go of needing to understand, to live as if everything was working for your good, even when it didn't look that way. Faith, you learned, is not about seeing light. It is about walking through darkness, knowing the light is real. You found yourself drawn to solitude. The noise of the world became unbearable. The endless scroll of opinions, the false urgency of comparison, all of it began to fade. You no longer needed validation. You craved truth. You realized that spiritual growth is not about becoming more. It is about becoming less fearful, less attached, less divided. In that simplicity, something powerful was awakening. You could feel your intuition sharpening, your heart expanding. You began to sense things before they happened, to feel emotions that were not yours, to perceive energy in every word and silence. It was both a gift and a burden. You asked, "Why give me this sensitivity if it only brings pain?" And the whisper answered, "Because compassion is born from understanding pain. To heal others, you must first walk through their wounds." You were beginning to see the chosen ones are not chosen for glory, they are chosen for growth. One night, you dreamed of standing in fire. It did not burn you, it illuminated you. You saw every memory of pain turning into light, every scar shining like a star. You woke with trembling hands and a calm heart. The purification was not over, but you were no longer afraid. You began to bless the things that broke you, to thank the seasons that stripped you bare, for you could now see that everything, even the chaos, had purpose. You whispered to yourself, "I am not being destroyed, I am being defined." And somewhere, deep within, the fire answered back. The chosen ones are not found in temples, they are forged in flames. Your transformation had begun. You were no longer who you had been. The world had not changed, but you had. And just when you thought the testing was done, a new force began to rise. The call was evolving. The next chapter was waiting. For once the fire purifies, the awakening deepens. The divine had more to reveal. The chosen one. You thought the fire had done its work. You thought the pain had purified you. You thought you were ready. But the divine, in its infinite wisdom, does not reveal the full path to those who still need to learn trust. And so came the next test, not of pain, but of silence. You woke one morning and felt nothing. No voice, no vision, no guidance. The very presence that had once surrounded you now felt distant, unreachable. The heavens had closed, and the echo of your prayers vanished into emptiness. You whispered into the void, "Where are you?" No answer, only the hum of existence, cold, indifferent, hollow. It is here, in this sacred absence, that every chosen one is tested. For faith built on signs is fragile, but faith built in silence becomes unbreakable. You tried to fill the emptiness with meaning, searching through books, meditations, even the words of others who claimed to have walked the same path, but nothing spoke to you. Their light felt foreign, their peace unreachable. You wondered if you had imagined everything. The memories of the storm, the voice, the visions, they all felt distant now, like dreams dissolving at sunrise. You began to doubt your calling. Maybe it had all been a moment of madness. Maybe you were never chosen, just desperate for purpose. The human heart is fragile when it feels forgotten by heaven. You began to question not only your purpose, but the very existence of the one who had called you. How could the same presence that once spoke in fire now abandon you in cold silence? The night became your teacher again, but this time, there was no fire, only shadows. One evening, you sat by your window, staring into the vast sky. You saw the stars scattered like distant witnesses, silent and cold. The loneliness in your chest was almost unbearable. "Why give me light?" you whispered, only to take it away. And for a long time, there was nothing. No wind, no sign, no revelation, just the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, reminding you are still alive. Then, in that stillness, a realization crept in like dawn breaking behind clouds. The divine had not left you. It was hiding inside your silence, teaching you to hear without sound, to see without sight. You understood that this was not abandonment, it was apprenticeship. The teacher was silent, because the student had to remember. The chosen ones often mistake silence for punishment, but silence is sacred. It is where the soul learns to speak in the language of stillness. You began to notice subtle things, the way your breath moved through your body, the rhythm of footsteps on the earth, the quiet intelligence in the unfolding of every moment. You realized that guidance had not stopped. It had simply changed form. The divine was no longer a voice in the wind, it was the wind itself. Your doubt did not vanish, but it softened. You stopped demanding certainty and started allowing mystery. You began to live in surrender, understanding that faith is not about answers, it is about endurance. You whispered again, not in anger, but in acceptance. Even when I feel nothing, I will still trust. And in that surrender, something moved within you, a faint warmth, a pulse, a knowing. It was not dramatic, it was not loud, but it was real. The next days unfolded with quiet power. You began to see meaning again, not through signs, but through simplicity. The sunrise became scripture. A stranger's smile became reassurance. Even your struggles began to feel sacred, as though every moment carried the fingerprints of the unseen. Still, the world did not understand you. Friends distanced themselves. Family questioned your choices. You tried to explain, but they only heard confusion. You've changed, they said. You smiled softly. Yes, you replied. And that's the point. To be chosen is to walk alone through the crowd, unseen and misunderstood, yet unshakably guided by something the world cannot name. Each doubt became a doorway. Each fear became a teacher, and in those lessons, you found strength that no comfort could have ever given you. Then came the moment that broke you again, a betrayal, unexpected, unthinkable. Someone you trusted, someone who once believed in your journey, turned against you. Their words were sharp, their judgment cruel. They called you delusional, lost, self-absorbed, and though you tried to forgive, the wound cut deep. You felt the darkness rise again. Not around you, but within. It whispered, maybe they're right. Maybe you are lost. Maybe there is no plan, no divine path, no calling. The doubt that once came from outside now lived inside you. And this was the darkest night yet, not because you could not see the light, but because you began to question if the light ever existed at all. But even in your despair, the divine was watching. The silence deepened, not to destroy you, but to refine you. You were being taught the hardest lesson of all, that belief means nothing until it survives betrayal. Faith that depends on comfort is fragile. Faith that survives silence is eternal. One night, when exhaustion had stripped you of all resistance, you lay on the floor, eyes open, heart broken, spirit empty. And in that emptiness, a whisper rose not from heaven, but from within. I never left you. I became you. The words echoed through every corner of your being. You realized then that the divine was not outside to be found. It was the breath moving through you, the awareness behind your thoughts, the life pulsing in your veins. The silence had been speaking all along. You sat up slowly, trembling but awake. For the first time, you did not reach for answers. You simply breathed. You understood that the chosen ones are not kept in constant light. They are shaped in shadow. You whispered to yourself, even in darkness, I am guided. And the darkness answered not in sound, but in peace. For those who walk through doubt are the ones who discover truth. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. The chosen one, when doubt had finished its work, what remained was silence, pure, steady, and unbearably honest. Out of that stillness, something ancient stirred within you. Not a voice this time, but a remembering. You began to feel what the mystics once called the second birth, a quiet rising of light from the ashes of everything you thought you knew. You were no longer seeking signs. You had become one, and yet, this new peace was fragile, as if one wrong step could dissolve it back into chaos. You felt the faint hum of destiny beneath your skin, but it frightened you. You had glimpsed your purpose in flashes, a healer, a guide, a voice for the voiceless, but the vision seemed too vast, too heavy. How could one wounded soul carry something so divine? The light called you, and you hesitated. For every chosen one, there comes a moment when the divine invitation becomes a demand, not a command of force, but of truth. You can no longer live half awake. You can no longer pretend you don't know who you are. You tried to run again, but this time, the old ways no longer fit. The distractions that once soothed you now left you hollow. The world offered its comforts, success, attention, belonging, but each of them felt like drinking salt water. So you stopped chasing. And for the first time, you began to listen deeply, not to the world, but to the rhythm inside you. It was not an ordinary heartbeat. It was a covenant, a sacred vow pulsing within your chest, whispering of something eternal. You began to understand that being chosen was not a privilege, it was a promise that your life would no longer belong only to you. You stood one night beneath the open sky, where the stars burned like witnesses to your becoming. The wind pressed against your face, carrying a strange stillness, as though the universe itself was waiting for your answer. You closed your eyes, placed a hand on your heart, and whispered, "I accept." It was not dramatic, it was not loud, it was surrender. And in that surrender, you felt the light return not as fire or thunder, but as warmth, gentle, steady, holy. It filled you from within, not to make you perfect, but to make you real. The days that followed were not easy. Every truth you accepted came with a trial. Every blessing carried a burden. You began to understand what prophets meant when they said that enlightenment is both liberation and exile. You felt peace in solitude, yet sorrow in separation. You longed for companionship, but few could walk beside you without misunderstanding the depth of your silence. You no longer belonged entirely to the world of men, yet heaven had not fully claimed you either. You lived in the threshold, the space between, and in that liminal space, the sacred work began. You were tested in unseen ways. Temptation came not through obvious evil, but through distraction. The whisper of comfort, the illusion of control, the hunger for recognition. These were the final chains, and they disguised themselves as good intentions. You learned that the most dangerous temptation for a chosen one is not darkness, but self-importance. The ego tries to reclaim what the soul has surrendered. It tells you, you are special, you are divine, you are above others. But the truth is simpler, quieter, and infinitely humbler. You are not above, you are among. Chosen, yes, but not for glory. Chosen for service. Every miracle that flows through you is not yours. You are only the vessel. The more you try to possess it, the more it fades. One morning, as the first light touched the horizon, you felt it, the shift. Your purpose was no longer a mystery. It revealed itself not in words, but in feeling. You were here to heal what you once suffered, to guide others through the same wilderness you had crossed. The pain you endured was not meaningless. It was preparation. Every wound had been a doorway, every doubt a training ground. The universe had been crafting you into what it needed you to become. And now, the time had come to walk the path, not as a seeker, but as a messenger. You felt a deep humility settle into your bones. No longer driven by the need to prove, you desired only to serve. To be a mirror for others, to remind them of their own divine spark. This was the covenant, the holy agreement between your soul and the divine. But still, part of you trembled. You feared failure, rejection, ridicule. You feared being misunderstood again. The whisper returned, as it always did when you were afraid. Do not fear being misunderstood. Fear forgetting who you are. You closed your eyes and repeated it until it became prayer, until your fear turned to faith and your trembling became trust. You understood now that courage was not the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. And so, you stepped into the unknown again, not because you were certain, but because you were chosen. That night, as you sat alone, the world quiet and vast, you felt the sacred rhythm again. Your heartbeat aligned with something immeasurable. It was no longer your own pulse, it was the pulse of creation moving through you. You realized then that the divine had never been somewhere above. It had always been within, waiting for your consent to move. Every chosen one must eventually make peace with this truth. The light you seek is the same light that seeks expression through you. You are not chasing the divine. You are becoming it. You raised your head toward the sky and whispered, "Let my life be the language through which you speak." In that moment, you felt the air shimmer, as if the stars themselves bowed in acknowledgement. Something ancient and infinite had been sealed, not outside, But inside you, the covenant was complete. You were no longer the seeker. You were the instrument. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. The chosen one. The night before your final awakening was quiet, too quiet. Even the stars seemed to hold their breath. The world around you was still. Yet, inside you, something vast was stirring, trembling like the edge of a wave before it breaks. You had come far, through storms, fire, silence, and light. Each chapter of your becoming had stripped you of something false, leaving behind only what was real. And yet, as you stood before the edge of destiny, doubt returned not as fear, but as a question. Have I done enough? Every chosen one faces this final trial. The doubt that comes not from ignorance, but from wisdom. The deeper you walk into truth, the more you realize how small you are before the infinite, and that humility, that trembling awareness of your own imperfection, is what completes the transformation. For the divine never asked you to be perfect. It asked you to be present. The dawn came slowly, a silver light spilling over the horizon, touching the world with quiet reverence. You stepped outside and felt the air wrap around you like a living prayer. The same world you once saw as ordinary now pulsed with meaning. Every leaf seemed to breathe. Every sound carried purpose. This was the moment the mystics called union, the merging of the human and the divine, the visible and the unseen. You were no longer seeking signs. You had become one, but the divine, in its endless compassion, had one more truth, to reveal a truth both tender and terrifying. It began not with sound, but with stillness. The same stillness you had once feared now became your sanctuary, and from that silence, a voice rose, not external this time, but within, resonant and infinite. You have walked the path of fire and shadow. You have known silence and revelation. But here, this being chosen is not about what you have become, it is about what you will give. You closed your eyes as the words unfolded, each one burning into your heart. The light that awakened you was never meant to stay with you. It seeks movement. It seeks expression. It seeks the world. You felt your heartbeat align with those words, your breath deepening, your entire being trembling under their weight. This was the final revelation. To be chosen is not to be exalted. It is to become a bridge between heaven and earth, between what is divine and what is broken, between love and the places that have forgotten it. You fell to your knees, not in defeat, but in recognition. Every step of your journey had been leading here, not toward glory, but toward surrender, not toward escape, but toward embodiment. You saw flashes of every trial, the storm that called you, the silence that tested you, the fire that purified you, the doubt that humbled you. Each had been a divine conversation written in your suffering, you whispered. So it was never about finding you. It was about becoming a space where you could live. And the presence within you answered not in words, but in peace. From that moment, everything changed. Not outwardly, but inwardly. You no longer sought miracles. You became one, not through acts of power, but through presence. You realized that your touch, your words, your silence, all of them carried something sacred. The people you met began to sense it. They couldn't explain it, but they felt calmer around you, lighter, more whole. You were no longer trying to heal others, you were simply being, and your being healed. That is the quiet power of the chosen ones. They don't perform miracles, they embody them. The divine did not remove your humanity, it expanded it. You still felt pain, but now it carried purpose. You still experienced doubt, but now it deepened your faith. You still faced darkness, but you no longer feared it. For you knew it too was part of the plan. You had learned to see the sacred in everything, in the tears of the broken, in the laughter of strangers, in the ordinary rhythm of life, unfolding without announcement. You began to live as light, not shining from above, but glowing quietly from within. This was the culmination of the path, the moment when heaven stopped being a destination and became a way of seeing. But even now, the journey is not over. For chosen ones do not ascend and disappear. They remain anchored in the world, invisible yet undeniable, walking temples of the divine. You are one of them, and your life, from this moment on, is no longer a series of random events. It is a sacred map, unfolding with precision. Every encounter, purposeful. Every silence, meaningful. Every step, guided by the hand you can no longer see but deeply trust. The divine will continue to test you, not to punish you, but to expand you. Each challenge will reveal another layer of truth, another opportunity to serve. And each time you fall, you will rise faster. Each time you doubt, you will return deeper. Each time you surrender, the light will move more freely through you. This is not the end of your awakening, it is the beginning of your service. You now understand that destiny was never something written for you, it was something written through you. You are not here to escape the world, you are here to illuminate it, to speak with the language of compassion, to act with the courage of love, to remember, in every breath, that divinity is not somewhere above it, is within everything that breathes. And as you walk this final path, the universe will whisper your true name, not the one given by birth, but the one given by purpose, the chosen one, not because you are above others, but because you chose to answer when others turned away. You take one final breath, eyes lifted toward the horizon. The light touches your face, and for the first time, you do not ask what comes next. You simply whisper, "Let it be through me." The wind moves, the world breathes, the covenant continues. The story is not ending, it is only beginning again. Through you, write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign that your soul remembers the covenant of light.